The snow fell gently from the black sky, casting a veil of silence over the village. The huts seemed to shrink into the frozen earth, as if trying to escape the biting cold. Elira huddled in her corner of the hut, her eyes fixed on the small fire that struggled to warm the air. Outside, the wind howled like a chorus of restless spirits, its mournful wail seeping through the chinks in the wooden walls and into Elira's bones. She shivered, despite the thick woolen cloak she wore, and wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Her eyes drifted towards the door, the one place where warmth and hope might reside. But it was too late. The door creaked open, and a figure loomed in the doorway. The village elder, his face a map of wrinkles and cruelty, glared at Elira with a mixture of contempt and disdain. "You re the cause of all our troubles," he spat, his voice like a rusty gate. "You've cursed us with your very existence." Elira's heart sank like a stone into the Erosi river that ran through the village. She knew this feeling, had grown accustomed to it. It was the weight of being an outcast, a pariah. The elder's words were like daggers, striking true and unrelenting. Elira felt the sting of shame as she rose from her corner, her eyes downcast, and approached him. "I didn't mean for things to go wrong," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The elder sneered, his face a twisted parody of compassion. "You've brought disease, famine, and despair upon us. You rea plague you, Elira, and it's time you paid the price." Elira felt the villagers gather around them, their faces lit by the flickering torches that cast eerie shadows on the ground. She knew what was coming, the condemnation, the punishment, the exile. The elder raised his hand, and Elira closed her eyes, prepared for the worst. The blow came swiftly, like a crack of thunder in the dead of night. It left her reeling, her ears ringing, as she stumbled backwards into the hut. The door slammed shut behind her, leaving Elira alone with her thoughts. She fell to the ground, her body racked by sobs that seemed to shatter the fragile silence within the hut. The fire crackled and spat in response, as if it too felt the weight of her despair. In the darkness beyond the flickering flames, the wind howled its mournful dirge once more, a requiem for Elira's lost innocence, a lament for the cruelty that had been visited upon her. As the night wore on, the villagers dispersed, leaving Elira to her fate. The fire burned low, casting eerie shadows on the walls as Elira slowly regained consciousness. She struggled to sit up, her head throbbing like a drumbeat in her temples. Gazing around the hut, she saw only darkness and despair. Her thoughts were consumed by the elder's words, echoing through her mind like a cruel refrain, "You rea plague you, Elira, and it's time you paid the price." The door creaked open once more, but this time it was not the elder who stood there. The figure of death itself loomed in the doorway, its presence as cold and unforgiving as the winter night. Elira froze, her heart locked in a desperate bid to flee. But she knew it was too late. She felt the icy grip of mortality upon her shoulder, as if the very fabric of existence had reached out to claim her soul. And then something unexpected happened. The figure of death did not take Elira's life. Instead, its gaze seemed to burn with an inner fire, a spark of recognition that pierced the veil of cruelty and despair that had shrouded the village for so long. In that moment, as the wind howled on and the fire crackled in response, something strange occurred. The angel of death turned away from Elira's soul, gaze fixing instead upon the village beyond. The darkness seemed to coalesce into a palpable force, as if the very essence of death itself had become judgmental. And as it gazed upon the villagers, the wind began to pick up speed, growing more fierce and menacing with each passing moment. Elira watched in horror as the villagers, unaware of the terror that loomed before them, went about their daily routines, unaware that their cruelty had awakened a force beyond their comprehension. And then, in an instant, everything changed. As the days passed, the village struggled to survive amidst the unrelenting curse. Crops withered and died, livestock fell ill or starved, and the once thriving community was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. The villagers, who had once taunted Elira for her supposed misfortune, now cowered in fear as they realized that their cruelty had brought about this downfall. Elira, meanwhile, walked among them with an air of quiet confidence, her eyes seeming to hold a deep wisdom and understanding. Her presence was both mesmerizing and unnerving, as if she possessed some secret knowledge that the villagers could only dream of possessing. As the weeks turned into months, the villagers began to whisper among themselves about the strange occurrences surrounding Elira. Some claimed that she had made a pact with dark forces, while others believed that she had been chosen by some higher power to exact revenge upon them for their cruel treatment. One cold winter morning, as the snow fell gently from the ski, a group of villagers huddled together in fear around the only remaining fire pit in the village. Their leader, an old man named Gorvoth, stood before them, his eyes wild with worry and desperation. "My friends," he began, his voice trembling, "I have seen things that no man should ever see. I have seen our children perish from hunger and thirst, our livestock fall to the ground, and our once thriving fields reduced to nothing but barren dust. And I know that it is all because of one person, Elira." The villagers murmured in agreement, their faces filled with fear and resentment. But as they looked at each other, a glimmer of doubt flickered across their eyes. Had they truly been wrong about Elira? Had she truly been the source of their misfortunes? As if sensing their uncertainty, Elira appeared at the edge of the group, her eyes fixed upon them with an unnerving intensity. Gorvoth, his voice quivering, pointed a shaking finger at her. "Look at her," he cried. "She is the one who has brought this curse upon us. She is the one who must be punished for our suffering." The villagers, their faces twisted in a mixture of fear and hate, began to chant Elira's name, their voices growing louder and more menacing with each passing moment. But as they did so, the air around them seemed to grow colder and darker, as if some unseen force was drawing near. And then, without warning, a gust of wind swept across the village, extinguishing the fire pit and plunging the villagers into darkness. In the sudden silence that followed, Elira's eyes seemed to flash with an inner light, her gaze piercing the shadows like a beacon of truth. As the villagers stood frozen in terror, a figure emerged from the darkness, tall, imposing, and shrouded in a hooded cloak. Its presence was both commanding and terrifying, as if it held the very power of life and death within its grasp. And then, in a voice that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest villagers, the figure spoke. "I am the one who has been brought forth by your cruelty." It said, "I am the one who has been awakened by your hatred and fear, and I will be the one who brings about your downfall." As the villagers cowered in terror, Elira's eyes seemed to flash with a mixture of sadness and compassion. For in that moment she knew that she was not the source of their troubles, it was they themselves who had called forth this curse. And as the darkness closed in around them, Elira vanished into its depths, leaving behind only one question: what lay in store for the villagers, now that the true nature of their torment had been revealed? The night was young, but the moon had already dipped below the horizon, casting a dark and foreboding shadow over the village. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay, as if the very land itself was rotting from within. Elira huddled in the corner of her small hut, her eyes fixed on the flames dancing in the hearth. She had heard the whispers, seen the glances. They were waiting for their chance to strike again, to mete out punishment for some perceived wrong she had committed. The weight of their hatred was crushing, and Elira felt like she was drowning beneath its oppressive force. Suddenly the door creaked open, and a figure loomed in the entrance. It was Gorvoth, his face twisted with malice, his eyes gleaming with a cruel light. "You re-coming with me?" he growled, his voice like a rusty gate scraping against stone. Elira's heart sank, her spirit crumbling beneath the weight of his words. She knew that look, had seen it before. It was the look of those who sought to do her harm, to punish her for some imagined transgression. And yet she refused to give in, refused to let them break her. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil churning within her. Gorvoth sneered, his lip curling up in contempt. "You all find out soon enough." He spat. "But for now, just come with me." Elira hesitated, unsure what lay ahead. But something within her told her that she had to resist, to stand tall against the forces of oppression that sought to crush her. With a deep breath she steeled herself and followed Gorvoth out into the night. The air was crisp and cold, biting at her skin like 1,000 tiny knives. Elira shivered, her eyes scanning the darkness for some sign of what lay ahead. But there was nothing, just the endless expanse of blackness stretching out before her like an abyss. Gorvoth led her to the edge of the village, where the thatched roofs gave way to a desolate wasteland. The wind howled through the grasses, whipping them into a frenzy as Elira stumbled behind Gorvoth. And then, without warning, he stopped, turned to face her. His eyes seemed to bore into hers, filled with a malevolent glee that made her blood run cold. "You re-going to die?" he hissed, his breath hot against her ear. "You re-going to join the spirits of the land and never trouble us again?" Elira's heart sank, her mind racing in panic as she realized what was happening. She tried to struggle, to break free from Gorvoth's grip, but it was too late. The darkness seemed to close in around her, a suffocating shroud that crushed the air from her lungs. Elira felt herself being pulled away from the world, dragged down into some cold and unforgiving abyss. And then, just as all hope seemed lost, everything went black. Elira's eyes fluttered open, her mind foggy with uncertainty. She was lying in a field of tall grasses, the wind rustling through them like a chorus of whispers. But where was she? How had she gotten here? As she struggled to sit up, a figure loomed before her, its features distorted and twisted into a grotesque grimace. The angel of death stood before her, his eyes blazing with an otherworldly fire as he reached out a bony hand. Elira felt a shiver run down her spine as he spoke in a voice that was both ancient and eternal. "You should not have survived," he growled, his breath like the rustling of dry leaves. "You were meant, Toady, to join the spirits of the land. But I see something in you that is not of this world." Elira's heart skipped a beat as she realized what was happening. The angel of death had come for her soul, but something was different. Something was wrong. And then, before she could even begin to comprehend the implications, the angel spoke again. "Justice will be served," he growled, his eyes flashing with an intense light. "The village that cast you out will pay the price for their cruelty. And when they do, you will be ready." As Elira watched in stunned silence, the angel vanished into thin air, leaving her to ponder the meaning of his words. But before she could even begin to wonder what lay ahead, a faint glow began to emanate from the grasses around her. It grew brighter and brighter until Elira was bathed in its warm, golden light. And as it enveloped her, something strange happened. Elira felt herself changing, growing stronger. Her senses heightened, her reflexes quickening. It was as if she had been reborn, remade into a creature of the night. And when the light finally faded, Elira looked around at the world with new ways. The wind whispered secrets in her ear, and the stars twinkled like diamonds scattered across the velvet blackness. She was no longer alone. She was no longer powerless. Elira smiled to herself, a cold and calculating smile that sent shivers down the spine of anyone who saw it. For she knew that justice would be served, and she would be the one serving it out. As the days passed, the village was racked by unexplained disasters. Crops withered and died in the fields, livestock fell ill and perished, and the once clear streams ran thick with murky sediment. The villagers, who had once been so cruel to Elira, now huddled together in fear, praying for deliverance. But the angel of death was not done yet. He continued to visit the village, claiming one soul after another. Those who had tormented Elira were the first to go, their screams echoing through the night as they faced the consequences of their actions. Elira watched it all from a distance, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she was at the center of the storm. She had never meant for anyone to suffer in this way, and yet here she was, the unwitting catalyst for the village's downfall. As the days turned into weeks, Elira became increasingly withdrawn. Elira turned it into Elise. She spent most of her time alone, lost in thought as she struggled to make sense of the strange turn of events. Why had death chosen her? What had she done to deserve this kind of power? One day, as she wandered through the desolate landscape, Elira stumbled upon a small clearing surrounded by a babbling brook and a ring of mushrooms. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient tree, its branches twisted and gnarled with age. Elira felt drawn to the tree, as if it held some kind of secret or power. She approached it cautiously, feeling the energy emanating from its trunk. As she reached out to touch the bark, a low rumbling sound filled her ears. The ground began to shake, and Elira stumbled backward in surprise. Suddenly the angel of death appeared before her. His eyes blazed with an inner light as he spoke in a voice that sent shivers down Elira's spine. "Elira," he said, his words dripping with power, "you have been given a great gift, only that few mortals possess. You have the power to bring life or death to those around you. It is up to you to decide how this power will be used." Elira was taken aback by the angel's words. She had never meant for anyone to suffer, and yet here she was, holding the key to their fate. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must learn to control your powers," the angel replied. "You cannot allow them to consume you, or you will become as cruel as those who once tormented you." Elira nodded, feeling a surge of determination course through her veins. She was determined to use her power for good, and she knew that this would not be easy. As the days passed, Elira spent every waking moment practicing her newfound abilities. She learned to harness her energy, channeling it in ways both subtle and dramatic. And as she did, the villagers began to notice a change in her. They saw her standing tall, her eyes blazing with an inner light as she confronted the injustices of their world. They heard her voice ringing out across the land, calling for justice and equality. And they knew that Elira was no longer the same outcast they had once shunned. She was now a force to be reckoned with, a power to be feared and respected. But as Elira's powers grew stronger, so too did the threat she posed to those around her. And it was only a matter of time before someone would seek to take advantage of her abilities for their own gain. As Elira stood tall, her eyes burning with an inner fire, a figure emerged from the shadows. His name was Malachi, and he was a man consumed by ambition. "I have come to offer you a deal," he said, his voice dripping with persuasion. "Join me, and together we can rule this land. You have the power to bring life or death to those around you. Imagine what we could accomplish if we worked together." Elira hesitated, unsure of what to do. She knew that Malachi was a master manipulator, and she didn't trust him as far as she could throw him. "What's your angle?" she asked, her voice firm but cautious. Malachi smiled, his eyes glinting with amusement. "Ah, Elira, I have no angle. I simply want to help you realize your true potential. Together we can achieve great things." Elira shook her head, her mind racing with the possibilities. She knew that she had to be careful, that Malachi was not what he seemed. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice firm but polite. Malachi nodded, his smile growing wider. "I thought you might see things me way. I'll wait for your answer." And with that he vanished into the shadows, leaving Elira to ponder his proposal. Leaving Elianished into To be continued. As the last wisps of consciousness dissipated, Elira felt a presence hovering above her, shrouded in an ethereal light. The sea wind howled its mournful lament, and the snowdrifts swirled around her like a vortex of desolation. Death's chill breath caressed her skin, and she closed her eyes, expecting the eternal silence to envelop her. But it didn't come. Instead, a warm, golden glow spread through her veins, as if the very essence of life had awakened within her. The cold that had seeped into her bones began to recede, replaced by a strange, tingling sensation. It was as if her cells were rebooting, resetting her very existence. Elira's eyes fluttered open, and she beheld the figure standing before her, Death herself. The spectral form gazed upon Elira with an unnerving intensity, her dark, flowing locks whipping about like a tempestuous sea. Her eyes, two voids of darkness, seemed to bore into Elira's very soul. "Why do you spare me?" Elira whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind's din. Death's gaze never wavered. "You are innocent," she declared, her voice like a gentle breeze on a summer's day. "Your people have wronged you, and I shall not take your life for their cruelty." With that pronouncement Death vanished, leaving Elira to process the sudden turn of events. As she sat up, her gaze fell upon the desolate landscape. The village lay shrouded in darkness, its thatched roofs crumbling like skeletal fingers. The once green fields now withered and grey, as if the very earth itself had been scorched. A sickly pallor spread across Elira's cheeks. "What have I done?" she whispered, her voice trembling with dawning horror. As she stumbled to her feet, a strange energy coursed through her veins. Her skin glowed with an ethereal light, as if the very essence of life had taken up residence within her. The villagers, oblivious to their impending doom, stirred in their homes, unaware that their cruelty was about to be repaid. In the days that followed, Elira found herself imbued with a new-found strength. Her steps quickened, and her movements became fluid and purposeful. The air around her seemed charged with an otherworldly energy, as if she had become a conduit for the very forces of nature. The villagers, meanwhile, began to notice a change in their fortunes. Crops began to wither, livestock fell ill, and the once clear streams ran murky. A sense of unease settled over them, like the shadow of some dark presence. And then the signs intensified. Windows shattered without provocation, doors creaked open of their own accord, and the winds howled a mournful dirge. The villagers, sensing the approaching storm, huddled together in fear. As night descended upon the village, Elira stood atop the highest hill, her eyes blazing with an unearthly light. Below her, the thatched roofs trembled as if the very fabric of reality was about to unravel. "You have been warned," she declared, her voice a gentle breeze on a summer's day. "The price of cruelty shall be paid in full." As the villagers cowered, Elira vanished into the darkness, leaving behind a trail of devastation and foreboding. And then, as if summoned by her departure, the true extent of their suffering unfolded. A fierce gust swept through the village, extinguishing torches and lanterns. In the sudden blackness, the villagers beheld the first sign of the apocalypse. A figure shrouded in shadow stood at the edge of the village, its eyes glowing like embers from the depths of the underworld. As the villagers froze in terror, Elira's voice whispered on the wind, "You should have spared me." As the days passed, the villagers' terror grew. Crops withered and died, livestock fell ill or disappeared, and those who had been cruel to Elira met gruesome ends. The once thriving village was now a desolate wasteland, and the people were forced to confront the consequences of their actions. Elira, meanwhile, continued to thrive under death's protection. Her hair grew longer and darker, her eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity, and her skin took on a radiant glow. She moved with a newfound strength and purpose, as if she had been reborn into a new existence. As the villagers struggled to comprehend the strange occurrences plaguing their village, Elira became increasingly withdrawn. She spent most of her days alone in the ruins of her former home, surrounded by the remnants of her childhood. Her nights were filled with vivid dreams and an unshakable sense of unease. One evening, as the moon hung low in the sky, Elira received a visit from a lone traveller. He was an old man, his face creased by time and hardship, his eyes burning with a deep wisdom. He introduced himself as Coll, a wanderer who had heard rumours of the cursed village. Coll approached Elira with caution, sensing the power emanating from her. He told her of his own struggles, of the hardships he had faced on his journey, and of the darkness that lurked in every corner of the world. As they spoke, Elira felt an inexplicable connection to this stranger, as if their paths were intertwined by some unseen force. "Why do you linger here?" Coll asked, his eyes piercing the shadows. "The villagers have forgotten your name, and yet you remain." Elira's gaze faltered, her thoughts drifting back to the life she had left behind. She recalled the cruelty of the villagers, the pain they had inflicted upon her, and the injustice that had been done. A surge of anger and hurt welled up inside her, threatening to consume her. Coll's voice broke into her reverie. "You are not defined by their cruelty, Elira. You have a choice. You can let their hatred consume you or use it as fuel to drive change." Elira's eyes snapped back to the present, her determination renewed. She knew that Coll spoke the truth. She had a chance to break free from the shackles of the past and forge a new path. She tobo hi the view the foul the shoe the view the shoe the shoe shall the view for shoe shoe the view issue the should have the balance of shoes As they continued to talk, Elira began to sense a strange energy emanating from Coll. It was as if he possessed some hidden power, some ancient knowledge that could aid her in her quest for justice. The connection between them grew stronger, their bond forged by shared experiences and mutual understanding. Just as Elira felt the weight of her past lifting, a chill ran down her spine. The air seemed to vibrate with an unseen force, and Coll's eyes gleamed with an otherworldly intensity. In that moment, Elira knew that she was not alone in her quest. A new Wali had emerged, one who shared her determination to right the wrongs of the past. But as they stood there, poised on the brink of a new beginning, a sudden gust of wind swept through the ruins, extinguishing the torches and plunging them into darkness. The silence was oppressive, heavy with foreboding. "Something is coming," Coll whispered, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "The balance is shifting. Elira, are you prepared to face what's ahead?" Elira's heart pounded in her chest as she gazed out at the darkening horizon. She knew that the fate of the village hung in the balance, and with Coll by her side, she was ready to face whatever lay ahead. But just as she steeled herself for the unknown, a figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes fixed on Elira with an unnerving intensity. The village of Brindlemark was a pitiful sight in the aftermath of the angel's judgment. Crops withered and died, livestock fell ill and succumbed to disease, and the once thriving villagers were now reduced to wandering skeletons. The air reeked of decay and death, as if the very earth itself had been poisoned by their cruelty. Elira, now imbued with a strange, otherworldly power, walked through the desolate landscape, her eyes scanning the devastation. She felt no triumph or vindication, only a deep sadness and a sense of responsibility for the fate that had befallen her former tormentors. As she wandered, Elira came across groups of villagers huddled together in desperation. Some begged for food or water, while others pleaded for forgiveness. But Elira knew better than to trust them. Their cruel hearts had not changed, and they would only use any kindness she showed as a means to manipulate her further. One figure in particular caught her attention, the village elder Callan. He sat atop a pile of rotting grain, his eyes sunken and his skin sallow. Elira could sense the desperation emanating from him, the realization that he had been wrong all along slowly dawning on him. As she approached, Callan looked up, his gaze locking onto hers with a mixture of fear and pleading. "Elira," he croaked, his voice like the rustling of dry leaves. "Please forgive us. We didn't know what we were doing." Elira's expression remained impassive. She knew that words were cheap, especially when spoken by those who had caused her so much pain. "What do you want from them?" she asked, her tone cold and detached. Callan's eyes dropped to the ground. We want your help. We need someone with your abilities to lift this curse. We're willing to do anything." Elira snorted in derision. She knew that their willingness was nothing more than a desperate attempt to buy her silence, to keep her from revealing the truth about their own complicity in their downfall. As she turned to leave, Callan's voice rose in desperation. "Wait, please," Elira down to go. "We'll do anything. Name your price." Elira paused, her eyes narrowing as she considered his words. She thought back to the angel of death's warning that she was now a vessel for justice, and that those who had wronged her would continue to suffer until they repented. A plan began to form in her mind, one that would not only bring relief to the villagers but also serve as a reminder of their cruelty. With a cold calculation, Elira turned back to Callan. "I'll help you," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "But it will cost you dearly." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Brindlemark in eerie twilight, Elira led the villagers on a journey that would test their mettle and reveal the true extent of their depravity. Little did they know, however, that Elira had already set her plan in motion. As they followed her deeper into the heart of the cursed land, she whispered ancient words to the wind, calling forth an unseen force that would soon shake the very foundations of their world. The villagers' screams began to echo through the darkness as the earth itself seemed to awaken from its long slumber. The ground cracked open, revealing a chasm so deep and wide that it seemed to stretch on forever. And at the edge of this abyss, Elira stood tall, her eyes blazing with an otherworldly light. "What have you done?" Callan cried out in horror as the villagers teetered at the precipice, their faces contorted with terror. Elira's voice was like a knife cutting through the silence. "You should have left me, Tudi, when you had the chance." As the days passed, the villagers began to notice a change in their surroundings. The once lush fields now withered and died, the crops shriveling up like desiccated mummies. Livestock fell ill, their moose and bass growing weak and feeble. It was as if the very land itself had turned against them. The villagers, however, were too consumed by their own suffering to realize that it was they who had brought this downfall upon themselves. They whispered among themselves of curses and plagues, never once considering that their cruel actions towards Elira might be the source of their troubles. One by one, the villagers began to fall ill, their bodies racked with fever and pain. Some died in their beds, while others succumbed to the harsh conditions outdoors. The village elder, a man named Gorm, was among the first to fall victim to the strange malady. As he lay dying, his eyes fixed on Elira, who stood at the edge of the village, her gaze distant and unfathomable. "Why has this happened?" Gorm croaked, his voice like a rusty gate. "Why have we been cursed?" Elira's expression remained impassive, but something in her eyes seemed to stir. It was as if she felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the villagers were finally reaping what they had sown, knowing that this is worth is it and then war and "It is not a curse," she said, her voice low and husky. "It is justice." Gorm's eyes narrowed, his mind racing with the implications. He knew that Elira had somehow been involved in their downfall, but he couldn't quite put his finger on how. As Gorm's life slipped away, the villagers grew more and more desperate. They turned to Elira, hoping against hope that she might possess some power or knowledge that could help them. But she just stood there, her eyes fixed on the horizon, her expression unreadable. "I don't know what you want," one of the villagers spat at her. "But if you have any way to stop this curse, we beg of you tell us." Elira's gaze never wavered, but something in her voice seemed to soften ever so slightly. "There is a way," she said, "but it will cost you dearly." The villagers looked at each other nervously, unsure what lay ahead. But Elira just stood there, her eyes burning with an inner fire that seemed to pierce the very soul of the village. And then, as if on cue, the wind began to pick up. It howled and whistled through the village, sending debris flying and knocking villagers off their feet. The sky grew dark, as if night was falling in the middle of the day. And in the midst of it all, Elira stood tall, her eyes flashing with a power that seemed almost divine. The villagers cowered, unsure what to do. But Elira just raised her hands, and the wind began to die down. The sky cleared, and the sun beat down upon them once more. The villagers looked at each other in confusion, unsure what had just happened. And then, as if summoned by some unseen force, a figure appeared on the outskirts of the village. It was a woman, tall and imposing, with eyes that seemed to burn with an inner fire. Her hair flowed behind her like a river of gold, and her skin glowed with an ethereal light. The villagers gasped in unison as she strode towards them, her eyes fixed on Elira. And then, just as it seemed like she was about to reach out and touch Elira's face, everything went black. To be continued. As the last wisps of sunlight dissipated from the sky, Elira huddled deeper into her makeshift shelter, the crude hut constructed by the villagers to contain her curse. The wind howled through the valleys, biting cold and unforgiving. Biting through cold and unforgiving. She shivered, her thin cloak offering little insulation against the chill. Outside, the village bustled with activity, people preparing for the winter festivities. Laughter and music drifted through the air, a stark contrast to the desolate silence within Elira's hut. Her eyes stung from the memories of yesterday's events, the beating, the accusations, the final rejection that sent her fleeing into the darkness. The door creaked open, and a figure stooped to enter. Callan, the village elder, his face etched with worry lines, approached Elira with a hesitant air. He bore a bundle of worn blankets and a small sack of provisions. Elira's eyes narrowed as he set the offerings down beside her. She knew their intentions, to placate the curse before it claimed another victim. The villagers thought her a malevolent spirit, drawn to misfortune like a moth to flame. But Callan's eyes held a glimmer of empathy, something she had seen in years. You should leave," Elira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This place is not for you." Callan hesitated, his gaze flicking between the shadows and the meagre provisions. "I've come to make amends," he whispered back. "The village is afflicted, crops withering, livestock falling ill, some have fallen sick. I think it's all connected to your presence here." Elira's heart skipped a beat as Callan drew closer, his breath visible in the cold air. For an instant she saw the elder she once knew, a just and fair man who would listen. The illusion vanished as he handed her the sack. "A little food," he said. "I'll bring more if you stay." The gesture was a small act of kindness, but Elira sensed ulterior motives. She didn't trust Callan's sincerity any more than she trusted the villagers' intentions. "What do you want in return?" she asked, her voice laced with suspicion. Callan's expression faltered, and he glanced around the dimly lit hut as if searching for an escape route. "Nothing," he said hastily. Just leave it at that." Elira watched him back away, her instincts screaming warning signals. The villagers were up to something, manipulating Callan or using their influence to further isolate her. She knew she had to be cautious, but the temptation to believe in this small act of kindness was strong. As Callan departed, Elira felt a strange energy building within her. It started as a tingling sensation in her fingers and toes, spreading like ice through her veins. The air around her began to vibrate, and she sensed an otherworldly presence lurking just beyond the edge of perception. The wind howled louder, its moan harmonizing with Elira's growing unease. She recognized this feeling, It was the same power that coursed through her when she'd confronted the villagers during the last full moon. The energy built until it burst forth in a blinding flash of light, sending Callan stumbling backward as he fled into the darkness. The hut creaked and groaned around Elira, the air thickening with an electric charge. She felt herself becoming one with this force, her body glowing with an ethereal light. The villagers' cruelty had awakened a power within her, a power that would not be contained. As the energy reached its peak, the hut exploded in a shower of splintered wood and debris. Elira stood amidst the wreckage, her eyes blazing with an unearthly intensity. The wind of down, replaced by an oppressive silence, as if the very fabric of reality held its breath in anticipation of what was to come. In that moment, Callan's words echoed through her mind. The village is afflicted, some have fallen sick. The villagers' suffering had only begun.